Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
Just not always the same ones.
I'm Steve Aiken from Fine Gardening Magazine.
And I'm Danielle Sherry, and I am also from Fine Gardening Magazine. Wouldn't it be funny if I said I was from a totally different magazine, like Horse and Hound? You'd be like, what the? I'm going to do that one of these episodes just to get you going, Steve.
It's sure to work. It's sure to work.
So today we are mixing it up. We have listened to you listeners and you have given us feedback and said, hey, why don't you guys do some more design orientated different episodes? And to a lesser degree, we're going to do that today because instead of just throwing out a bunch of plant recommendations, we're going to throw out a bunch of plant recommendations, but plant recommendations for pairings. We're going to call this episode Perfect Plant Pairings. And it is several of our favorite plants, but ones that we like to plant together because they make a very compelling, captivating combination. Is that an appropriate way to describe this episode, Steve? I'm not really sure. I'm floundering.
Well, I guess if that's what you did, then that's
Wait,
a way to.
What did you do? How else would you describe a perfect plant pairings episode?
Oh no, I'm sure I come in, underneath that definition of what you just did. So yeah, we'll be good. We'll be good. Two plants that look good together.
Right. Yeah. Because it's all well and good. Well, one of mine might have 3 plants, but it's all well and good to, what we normally do where we pick a topic and we throw out 4 plants. But, that only goes so far in the garden. And then you go, all right, I got this really cool plant. Now, what the heck do I put around it to make it not look like a sore thumb,
So if anybody is kind of, listening to the subtext here, Danielle doesn't explain to me really what the episode is about. Then you'll notice that she threw in a little bit there, like, oh, one of mine has 3 plants. So she cheats as well. So she doesn't tell me what the terms are. Then whatever those terms are, she doesn't abide by them anyway. So,
I mean, you're a parent. You know how this is. You adjust the rules as you go along here. It's the only way to get through life.
So this episode is about something with some stuff in it that defined by some parameters somewhere that may change. Yeah.
No, for the most part, it is perfect plant pairings. It's 2 plants that look really great together. Just, kind of go together like Frank and beans. How about that? Is that better?
I don't like Frank and beans, but I get what you're saying.
All right.
So can I launch into my first?
Yeah. So how
thing?
did you come about it? Were you like, okay, let me look for something for the sun, shade, tough situation, or?
I the first 3 pictures I came across that had 2 plants that look good in them is what I did. To be quite frank,
love it. Yes.
But that, I think they all, they're all really good combos. And I'm excited by them. And hopefully they will continue to be so. The first combination I fell in love with just this spring because I had a bunch of plants in pots. And as I was shuffling from here to there, to here, getting them, out of the trunk and into the shade, and then somewhere where it's easy to water, they got moved around a lot. And at some point, I happened to put these 2 plants together, and I said, "Wow, that looks really good. I'm going to have to plant those together." So the plants are Heartleaf Alexander, which we all know is Zizia aptera. It's a native plant. I'll describe in a second. But I paired it with Brilliance autumn fern. And they just look wonderful together in their pots. So I planted them together. The Dryoptera sort of surrounds the Heartleaf Alexander, which rises through the fern fronds. So the Heartleaf Alexander, which it makes it sound like some sort of Victorian. I believe you're referring to Heartleaf Alexander. Like it's
Right.
some sensitive poet type, who wanders the moors, and and the people from Bridgerton talk about him, as this elusive heart to be captured. But it's a native plant, hardy zones 3 to 8. Sorry, gets to be about 1 to 3 feet tall. 1 to 2 feet wide, and it has these glossy leaves to it that are heart-shaped at the base. That's why they call it heart-leaved Alexander. There are other Alexanders. There are other members of the Zizia so this one is different from those by having those heart-shaped leaves. And then from late spring to early summer, it sends up these flowering stems that have just the flat-topped clusters of yellow flowers. It's in the carrot family. So if you know what a carrot flower looks like.
Like an umbel type flower.
Yeah. It kind of looks like that. And, just scads and hordes of beneficial pollinators. I grabbed that right from a website because I like the word scads. But now that I say it, I realize that doesn't sound like my kind of word.
No, it really doesn't. But
I have to acknowledge I ripped that off of a website. But yeah, tons of beneficial pollinators, all over this. Even I noticed it even before it was planted while it was still in the pot. Things are coming by to check these flowers out. It likes full sun to partial.
You paired it with a fern.
I was about to get there. Full sun to partial shade. Now we have a fern.
Full shade.
Brilliance fern, partial shade to full shade. Yes.
Okay.
And so the brilliance fern emerges with like the orange coppery tones to it, and sort of fades to green, so it has like the multicolored ferny fronds to it. About 18 to 24 inches tall, and so you get the Alexanders rising from the middle of it, and I have them in partial shade, both of them, where I feel like what I've got is two kids from the opposite sides of the tracks, that really make a wonderful pair. And we've got to do what I can to make these kids, to give these kids a chance, so they meet in the middle of partial shade. And gosh, if these two crazy kids can't make it together, then what hope is there for any of my plants in my garden?
I feel like you're going to start singing a John Cougar Mellencamp song right now.
I was thinking more like West Side Story kind of thing.
Okay. Feel free to launch into one of those show tunes.
Yeah. Well, we want people to continue to listen, so I won't do that. But they look amazing together. So you have the yellow flowers of the Alexander with the orangey tones of the fern. And they both have kind of like a light, airy texture, and they look great together. And if they can both stand being in partial shade, then I've got a winner. And so far, so good on this. It's been 2.5 months. So, I think success is assured. If they do not fall victim to the "Let's Argue About Plants" curse, I mentioned the plant, and then it does.
Yeah. That's really cool. No, I was not. You threw me off for a second there because you mentioned the fern, and then you said heart-leafed Alexander, and I was thinking, oh, is he going to talk about? Is it Alexander's giant Brunnera, which kind of has heart-shaped leaves? And I was thinking, wait, what? Huh? Ooh. But this sounds so much cooler. That's a plant I am wholly unfamiliar with. Absolutely unfamiliar with. Did you hop on that bandwagon because it looked cool, or because you were interested in this native plant that you had no idea about?
It's a native plant that I've always wondered about. Like Golden Alexanders is usually the name, and the name Zizia. I'm like, that's weird. Oh wait, it's a native, so it's from around here. Why do I not know this? And then it just so happens that I found myself with two of them. Let's not get into how. But there they were, and they looked good with these ferns, and so we have a match. Like I said, Romeo meets Juliet. And the full sun Montagues and the full shade Capulets are just going to have to come together and let these two kids work it out.
I love it. I love it. Let's hope it doesn't end how that story did.
Yes, bad metaphor. Bad metaphor.
So, all right. We're going to go from the partial shade into the full sun. And, I got to say, I struggled with this topic because over the years, you have things in your garden that work out. You have things that don't. But when I thought of perfect plant pairings and I was trying to only stick to 2 plants, there was a photo that I had taken in the garden of Catherine Mix, who's out in Sequim, Washington. I think the first year I started with fine gardening. So we're going on 15 years now. And we actually ended up featuring it in one of our calendars that we used to do in the magazine. And it still to this day is the one photo that I continually think about when somebody says a great plant pairing. And it's two plants that ordinarily I don't like. And one of them is Foxtail lily, which is Aromaris robustus. And one of them is annual poppies, which I don't really bother much with annual poppies. I usually forget to plant the seeds. It's something that I always see in other people's gardens. I never grow. I don't know why. But it was Scarlet Peony annual poppy, which is a dark scarlet red color, one of these double peony or double poppies rather. Don't like red. So here's these two plants that I don't really love. I don't really like. I find them hard to deal with because they're, very tall and they've got, this strappy thing going on, and they kind of stick out like weird rockets out of the garden. And I have a hard time usually with those. Maybe that's because for my back of the border, I normally just stick shrubs back there and call it a day. So here's these, this perennial and this annual and what on earth, but it just works. And it just worked because, Foxtail lily aromaris, it's got this strappy foliage that by the time that large candle of whitish cylindrical flower that really does look like a bottle rocket starts blooming, the foliage is kind of on the decline. It's starting to yellow out. It's not looking so good. And so you got to put something around it to hide the base of that ugliness. And so enter this taller annual poppy, which is going to be about 3 feet tall. Aromaris around the 3 to 5 foot mark. Sometimes they get much, much larger, but 3 to 5 feet. So here's this Scarlet Peony poppy, which is confusing. And it's got those gorgeous glaucous blue leaves that are kind of ruffled, really, really dense foliage around the base, covering the yucky bottom of the aromaris, but then shooting up these giant stems to 3.5 feet tall of these gorgeous scarlet red poppy flowers that are double bloomed. So they're just these little pom-poms that are sitting up on top. And the two of those together at the back of a border, just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And gosh, it's all the things that I don't like. It's colors I don't like. It's annuals, which I don't plant a lot of. It's aromaris, which I think looks kind of funky and weird. I mean, it's called desert candle. I just don't think it looks right in a New England setting or in a more herbaceous border. But looks so cool. Looked incredibly, incredibly cool. I already mentioned that Scarlet Peony poppy is an annual, but aromaris goes from zones 5 to 9. Sometimes you see 9B. So yeah, it just stuck in my head, and I can't ever get that plant pairing out of my head. I've never done it in my own garden, but it is one of the most dynamic pairings I've ever seen.
Okay, so we should set the timer. I don't know where. There's so many things I want to jump on there. First off, I just want to say that the combinations I'm talking about are all in my garden, designed by me.
I have two of those too. Those are coming up.
Yeah. Second, how could you not like aromaris? It's Foxtail lily. It's amazing. I have it growing. It's for me, it's hard to get it growing. I guess its roots don't like to dry out or something. So when you get it shipped to you, you got to plant it right away. So I grew one down in the fine gardening test garden. I think it's still there. I planted a couple. I think I planted 3 in my garden last fall. I had 2 come up this year. Looked super cool. Just a great plant. And then, you say, these are plants and colors I don't like, but I like these. So maybe you do actually like those colors. Maybe you do actually like those plants.
I don't think so.
Get off the negative train, Danielle, and come over to the positive meadow where we like things and we're open-minded to what we do like.
I mean, I'm open to it definitely, because I just obviously, if I'm still thinking about a plant pairing 15 years later,
And you still haven't planted it?
And obviously there is something going on there that is pretty cool. I should mention too, I don't think I did. This is definitely a full sun, moist, well-drained soil situation for both of these plants.
The parts that I'm all on board with is A, forgetting to plant the poppy seeds. Yes. And B, the need to plant something around the foxtail lily. That's because the foliage phase, but the whole thing is gone, by mid-July, there's really nothing there. So it's important to have something around that. And I think I am going to, because I have about 15 packets of poppy seeds, which, I always say to sow in the fall, but I buy them in the spring and then I forget. And then there was the one year I did go out to plant them in the fall on a windy day. And
how'd that work out?
It didn't. Poppy seeds are tiny and are easily carried by the wind. So I think I really they sowed pretty well along the in the road and the drainage culvert and my neighbor's driveway but I don't think that they could take hold through the through whatever roads are made out of. It's not tar anymore anyway. So yeah, I'm going to write that down. That's a great idea from Catherine Mix.
Okay, Steve, so we've done a good job. We did a partial shade situation, you did, and then I did full sun. So where are you taking me on your garden tour now?
Right back to partial shade. I didn't know we were doing this conditional wandering. I didn't know that was a thing. But my next one, I could skip ahead to my other
no. Okay. I would never want to, mess with your pacing here. Go ahead, pace car.
But you do it all the time. So anyway, the next combination that I'm absolutely in love with is Valentine bleeding heart and all gold Japanese forest grass.
Gorgeous.
So if by now we all should know all gold Japanese forest grass, and if you don't know, get to know it. It's a great plant. So it has grassy leaves of chartreuse. Gets to be, foot and a half, maybe 2 feet tall, and spreads to at least 2 feet, and then it will just kind of keep going. Hardy in zones 4 to 9. But Valentine bleeding heart, it's Dicentra spectabilis. Hortival is the cultivar name. So Dicentra spectabilis is the one with the big, graceful, prettiest flowers, prettier than Dicentra exemia, which is the native one. It's prettier, but it's also the one that peters out in July, early August. Fingers crossed. I went out yesterday. It's now early to mid June. My Valentines are hanging in there and still doing just fine. But
early to mid July.
Yeah.
You said early to mid June. I'm like, wait, July. It looks good then. No, July, and it's still holding on.
And that's how far behind I am with my deadlines. But so the thing about Valentine bleeding heart, what makes it different is that the traditional bleeding heart has sort of a faded red flower, almost pinkish, flower. This thing has fire engine red with the little white dangly thing. That's a botanical term. Sorry. And so it's really, really, powerful little heart-shaped flowers with their little spurs sticking off of them. But it's so much more intensely red than the traditional one. And even better, the stems are extremely dark, reddish purple to black. I thought they were black, and then I went and looked at them. They're kind of like purplish. So it has this darker, moodier vibe. And when I have it planted surrounded by the all gold, you get this strong contrast of the bright and the dark, and it just looks super cool. The only downside is that I kind of have to keep cutting back the all gold because it wants to just be aggressive and spread into the Valentine. And the Valentine, I think, is starting to bulk up and claim its territory. But if it ain't going to do it, then all gold's going to take the space. So Yeah, I mean, so you've got the chartreuse with this really, pops of dark stems with these fire engine red and white flowers on it. Just a wonderful combination. It blooms for, gosh, a long time in spring. It's an early spring combination. So about the time it's putting out its flowers, the all gold, which comes back pretty early, is up and doing its thing. It's great. I took about 57 photos of it this spring, and I think the one that's in focus is the one that I'll put on the website.
So eventually, assuming that it will decline completely, and then the all gold is going to take over the scene.
Well, I mean, it's not going to destroy but for the season, like you will not see Valentine.
Yeah, it's so as that foliage is starting to, yellow and fade out, then the all gold kind of like takes over, and so you won't see that, because that's like my big thing with Dicentra spectaculus. It's like, it starts hitting July, and it's like, oh, it looks like it's dying, but that's its natural, that's its natural gig, basically.
Right.
But that bums me out. So I like that plant pairing that you're kind of doing what I was doing in the last pairing. You got to hide the unsightliness. So that makes a good match.
Yeah.
So, all right, you're not going to give me a hard time then, because we're going to stay in the partial shade. Man, we should have talked about
I'm not promising anything, but.
So this is my garden. This is back to my garden. The next two plant pairings are back in my garden. And this was a complete accidental pairing. I did not plan this out. I feel like oftentimes the best plant pairings are accidental, or at least maybe in my garden, because I'm not a good planner. But this is Invincibelle.
Honestly, sorry to interrupt, but that's a guilty secret of garden design.
It
is that most things are accidental. And as you walk around and talk with someone who has a great gardener, a great garden designer, you'll find so many times like, well, that it's an accident. And I just got out of a garden in Vermont. We're like, oh, it was a self-sown thing, so yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. No, that makes me feel better, because that is the best kept secret probably in garden design. But all right, so I started out with Invincibelle Wee White smooth hydrangea. So that's hydrangea arborescens, and it's a bunch of letters. It doesn't matter as its cultivar name. It's Wee White. It's one of the newer dwarf smooth hydrangeas. It's zones 3 to 8, and it gets to be about 2.5 feet tall. Sometimes the blooms stretch it out to be a little bit taller than that. So I stick this guy because I love my smooth hydrangeas. I got Wee White because I was very excited. It doesn't do the flopping that the full-size smooth hydrangea arborescens do. Stays a little more compact. Still some full-size blooms on that baby, though. We're talking softball-sized white blossoms. They kind of start out chartreusey green, and then they fade to white. Holds its own even in rainstorms, which is kind of nice, especially since we had a crazy thunderstorm last week, and mine are finally starting to come into bloom. And that guy was just kind of hanging out in the middle of my border, just doing its thing, looking pretty good for a couple years. And we had the plant sale. And I thought, oh, check out this amazing golden angel Japanese shrub mint, Leucoseptrum japonicum golden angel. I'm like, oh, I have 0 space for this baby. This is an awesome herbaceous perennial, zones 5 to 8, kind of chartreusey foliage, a little more sun. If you put it in a little more sun, it gets more yellow, hence the golden angel. If you put it in a little more shade, it's more of a chartreuse color. All right, 2 to 3 feet tall, a little bit bigger than Wee White. I have no idea where I'm going to put this thing. It's fall. I chuck it in the ground, the Leucoseptrum next to the Wee White, and say, all right, I'm done. It sat in a pot for months and months and months, and I just needed to get it in somewhere. And I'm like, all right, the space is limited in my partial shade area, so let me just chuck it together. So that was a couple years ago, I think 2 years ago, and maybe more. And now that these are both full-size plants in the 2.5 to 3 foot range, the Leucoseptrum being a little bit larger, it's such a beautiful combination that when the hydrangea arborescens starts blooming and it's blossoms are more in that, margarita green color. And the way that the leucoceptrum picks up on that limey green color through its foliage. And the leucoceptrum really backs up the foliage of that hydrangea arborescens. And it's a perfect pairing because you've got the color contrast, you have the shape contrast, because on the arborescens, the leaves are, kind of large and, somewhat, oval shaped. And then the leucoceptrum leaves in that bright yellowy chartreuse color are lance shaped and oblong. And it's the perfect, pairing of contrast, basically contrasting color, contrasting shapes. And it's a really, really nice middle of the border filler. That leucoceptrum might as well be a shrub, which is maybe why I love it so much, because it bulks up, 3 feet tall and wide. That is a monster of an herbaceous perennial. And, I have it in partial shade. This is a well-drained area, no supplemental water whatsoever. And I have really, really terrible lean soil. So that both of those will hold their own in that circumstance. And that pairing just looks great starting in, early spring when they're, both of them are putting on their foliage, and then the hydrangea comes into bloom. I've never seen, and I probably have never noticed, the leucoceptrum blooming, but I hear that the flowers are nothing to write home about. They're kind of these little white flowers that come out on a arched stem. I don't grow it for that. I don't care about that. Maybe mine has never bloomed. Maybe it has. I've never noticed. So that tells you about how spectacular the flowers are. But it doesn't need it because it's got the hydrangea there backing it up.
Well, the blooms come in like October. When you're not out there noticing stuff, you're out there raking leaves. So,
probably right, exactly. Exactly.
I wish you had told me about this like a month or two ago, because I was wandering around with some golden angel trying to find a place to plant it. And I have a spot near my wee white that there's a bit of a hole. Now the good news is that I also have a Sun King Aurelia that needs a home. And Sun King Aurelia has the golden lance-shaped leaves, just like leucoceptrum. It's would you say the Aurelia is going to get bigger and bulkier than
way bigger, way bulkier, yeah.
And so I think that's the key difference there between those two. So I might put a Sun King Aurelia over there. Don't worry, it's not one of the divisions that you gave me. And here's a bonus combination: Sun King Aurelia in a tall, narrow, deep red burgundy pot looks amazing. And that's where that's where I put one of your divisions that you gave me. Oh, and it looks awesome. And it's going to town. For some reason, the divisions that you gave me of Sun King Aurelia were so much more vigorous than what I was growing and that came in a pot. Those are struggling to get a step.
Yeah, you struggled with Sun King Aurelia for so long. And every time I mentioned it on the podcast, you were like, I know you can grow that plant, but I certainly can't grow that plant. So maybe that's the key, just to, get those divisions. Because you saw the roots off those divisions. They were, tentacles like an octopus. It was crazy.
So I total sidebar, and we
total sidebar, but I love it. Bonus combo.
But you gave me two divisions. One went in the pot. The other one went in the front of my house. And as things were drier earlier in the year, I'm like, oh my God, I've got to get out and water the Sun King. I haven't been out there in a while. I would walk by when everybody else is kind of all the new planting I've done. Really need the water. The Sun King's like, what's up? Like I don't need any water. I'm doing fine. If you're gonna give me water, I'll take it. But I'm doing okay here, Steve. Feel free to move on to that guy over there who's kind of wilting. And those are the divisions. There must be such vigor in those roots, from having it get established, as opposed to the new ones. I have one that's every day it gets smaller, and I don't know what the deal is.
That plant that I took the divisions off of, I've got 2 Sun King Aurelias. I've got them in 2 different locations. And that plant that I took those divisions off of, and so you got a couple, our art director got a couple, another one of the editors got a couple. I took a bunch out of that plant. That plant right now is about 6 feet tall by maybe 6.5 to 8 feet wide. It's huge. And that was after I probably took away a third, if not more, of that plant. It's a beast. It's a beast. So, all right. So we like, so just to refresh everyone's memory, Sun King Aurelia and Wee White Hydrangea, or Invincibelle Wee White Hydrangea and Golden Angel Leucoceptrum if you want a slightly smaller plant pairing.
So, accidental combinations. Okay, I guess this one is absolutely accidental. I don't know why I came to start buying daylilies years ago, and there's a podcast episode devoted to daylilies. And it was right around that time where I was contacted by the American Daylily Society, and they want to like, well, how do we get more attention on daylilies? And I said, I don't know. I mean, we're doing a podcast. What more do you want? I mean, they're daylilies, for heaven's sake, and then, they gave me like 15 catalogs and like, yearbook style things with all these pictures in it. And so, I bought some, and they look great. They're doing great. And one that is really doing well is called Lavender Arrowhead, which sounds like an all girl pop metal band.
Yeah.
But Lavender Arrowhead daylily, zones 3 to 10. And I have that planted just above some Hummelo betony, Stachys officinalis Hummelo, that's zones 4 to 8. And I it was not intentional at all. It was just like, oh, I have some room here. Let me chuck this in. First the daylily, and then a couple of years later, I have some room here. These Hummelo need a home. Let me chuck those there. And of course, now that I say this, I'm wondering if those are Hummelo. They might be. I gotta make a correction here, people. I don't want to give. I don't want to give people the wrong information. But this is Stachys officinalis Summer Crush or Summer Beauty. It's the pinker one.
Yeah,
not the more magenta one. I automatically go to Hummelo, and then now that I recall the situation of their planting, I'm like, oh no, those aren't Hummelo. Those are the Summer Crush, or whichever ones that come from Brent Horvath. But they're pinker. They have a pink bloom, and so Lavender Arrowhead, as daylily blooms go, it's more of a spider daylily, so it has long kind of windy petals to it. Mm-hmm. Not like the full trumpet kind of thing. And it's supposed to be purpler than it is, apparently, because I keep looking it up to make sure I have the right plant. And mine's a little pink. It's got like pink, on God, there are terms for this. The throat is yellow, but then as you get out along the petals, it turns pink. It's supposed to be lavender, and maybe as it gets a few years older, this is maybe like 2-3 years old now. Maybe as it gets older, it will turn purpler. But right now they're pink, and they look great with the Stachys Summer Crush, not Stachys Hummelo, Stachys Summer Crush. Mm-hmm. And it's a good thing I didn't put these on our website yet. And it's a great combination that I really didn't realize until I was taking a picture of the Lavender Arrowhead, and I backed off a little bit and said, oh, that looks good with this. And if we're going to throw in third plants, like I hear you're going to do, it's backed up with some silver lamb's ears, another Stachys, Stachys byzantina, big ears, and so that throws a whole nother tone into it. But you've got the tall and arching daylily. You're coming over the low mounds of the Stachys. They bloom at the Stachys starts blooming a little earlier, but they just match so well with the colors. They're in that pink purple range that I can pinkle. I guess I should start calling it, because I can never.
No. You can stay away from that word pinkle. Something doesn't sound right about that.
And they, the stacky says is bottle brush flowers, whereas the firework explosion of the daylily. But they have that color in common. So it just looks great, and I can't wait for them to grow a little more together and get a little bigger. I think it's going to be super cool, and I'm going to wind up taking thousands of pictures of it.
Well, okay. So preview. Did you post this on Instagram, on the Fine Gardening Instagram?
I did.
I thought so. Okay. So it was ringing a bell, and as I was scrolling through, I said, that's
Danielle,
a really pretty daylily.
Can people follow along with the Fine Gardening Instagram?
They totally can follow along.
Oh, yeah. And so they would see things like this from time to time.
They would. They would.
Great idea. It's such a great idea.
They would. We are at Fine Gardening. If you would like to follow along in our Instagram feed.
and so that's how I do it. I go to my iPhone and download the Instagram app, and if I already have it, just type in at Fine Gardening and then hit follow. Follow, and then I would see pictures like this among hundreds others.
Many other beautiful photos.
Tons of gardens and plants on there. Gosh, yeah, that's a great idea.
True. So true. Yeah, you better do that. And while you're at it, if you want to see even more beautiful pictures, you can go to finegardening.com, where you'll find the show notes for this episode and 92 others, along with plant pictures that match up with our plant list. Thanks so much.
That sounds too complicated.
Well, no, I just remember seeing that photo on our Instagram feed and going, wow, that is a truly beautiful daylily. And I feel like daylilies get bad rap. We've already talked about this in our daylily episode, but there's a lot of cool daylilies out there. That one was stuck out to me because it was a very interesting color. I would say that it was lavender. I mean, in the photo, I don't know if you did any filters or whatever to it, but it was a little, it did strike me as lavender, like a very, very pale lavender. But the other thing that I thought was super cool with that was just the shape of that daylily bloom, that it was one of those spider daylilies where it looks really, really interesting. You almost look twice and you think, oh, that's one of those cool Australian plants that nobody knows about. And it's like, oh, no, it's a daylily, but it's
right.
Cool.
It couldn't be easier to take care of. It's also growing. I actually ripped this out, but it was growing near hydrangea arborescens. So the arborescens would kind of flop over, as arborescens will do, and so the daylily blooms would stick through that, and almost like again, fireworks. Amongst a sky of these white pom poms of the hydrangea arborescens, and it just looked amazing. There's also Let's Argue About Plants Instagram page, which we tend to less often, but still you can still find some wonderful things on there. I don't know why we tend to things less often on Let's Argue About Plants, but if I think of it, I try to put it on the Let's Argue About Plants Instagram
I've been terrible
page.
About it for a very long time, admittedly.
It's true. Like the last dozen or so photos all seem to be from me and my garden. But that's at Let's Argue About Plants on Instagram. Also worth following.
Definitely. And I will have to get my acting gear. All right.
And Snapple is made from the best stuff on earth. And it's just, they didn't pay. Okay, never mind.
No, not a sponsor.
They didn't pay up.
Not a sponsor. So, all right, we were in an area of full sun, yes, with this last combination of yours, and you said in kind of well-drained, leanish soil. Is that?
It would be as regular a soil as you can get. It's the soil of someone who doesn't really take care of his soil, except for the occasional mulching. It's dry. It's on a slope, so well drained.
We could not have, you basically just lobbed a softball at me for transitions, because that's exactly the location that we're going to go in my garden, is a area of full sun on a slope, lean, well-drained soil. Occasionally I mulch it. It's a tough spot. It's a really, really tough spot. And this is one of my favorite fall combinations. It is none of the plants in this combination are earth-shattering, but they're solid performers. And it's an unexpected time for these two plants to get, a little what's up. And it is Ogon spirea and any kind of upright sedum. The one in this particular area is Purple Emperor. But the thing about Ogon spirea, and I mean, I've talked ad nauseum about Ogon spirea. I mean, it really is a bomb-proof shrub. It is not an invasive. It is Spirea thunbergii. It is not going to reseed itself all over the place. It is a great shrub. It's got these arching branches of small needle-like chartreuse yellow leaves. It blooms beautifully, white panicles of flowers, white, kind of shower of flowers in spring. Then it just holds its own with that color. It doesn't burn in too much sun like a lot of yellow leaf plants. It doesn't really want for any fertilizer, regular water. You don't really need to prune it unless you wanted to take it back. It just has a naturally great shape all to its own. But here's what people don't talk about with Ogon spirea. It gets fantastic fall color. If you're in an area, where you get, those early frosts in, October-ish, September-ish, it puts on a color show that looks like you lit a match onto this shrub. It gets orange, it gets red. It's a Technicolor dream coat of colors when the temperatures cool down. Now, with those arching stems in this shrub that's, 3 to 5 feet tall and wide, you plant an amazing upright sedum around it. I don't care if it's purple emperor with, the purple foliage. I don't care if it's sedum autumn joy, which is just really, kind of your go-to standard. But as that sedum hits those cooler temperatures too, the sedum blossoms, which are normally, in the pinky range, they turn the color of your shirt that you're wearing right now. They turn this brilliant burgundy color that's just shockingly beautiful. And backed up, not your shirt, Steve, the color. As Steve looks around and is like, whoa, hey, check me out. But that sedum with the backdrop, which, those upright sedums can be 2.5 feet tall and wide, but just, planted in front of that Ogon spirea, it's a fall show like no other. And you cannot get two tougher plants than those two plants. They're just spectacular. Now, since we're allowing for a third plant in the mix, throw in a purple-leaved ornamental grass in there. If you want just the ultimate purple leaf ornamental grass, you're going to go for Pennisedum rubrum, which is purple fountain grass. That's not hardy here. That's a zones 9 to 11 plant. It's not hardy here, but it's gorgeous. But, think standing ovation, little blue stem that gets, a nice burgundy color to it. Think, especially towards the end of the season, think Black Hawks, which we had talked about, I think, last episode, which is another blue stem, but a big blue stem. Throw in that purple leaf grass in there too, and you have sheer perfection. It is just an awesome show. And these are plants that still hold their own throughout the rest of the season, but come fall, wow, just beautiful. And like I said, you cannot get a tougher plant combination. I mean, this is horrible soil, full sun, no supplemental water, and these just do really, really, really well together.
Yeah, I have my spirea ogons in the worst possible place that anyone could grow a plant. And I think from time to time that I should rescue them from this hellacious place that I have them. But then something needs to grow there. Amidst the poison ivy and bittersweet and weeds and whatnot. It was one stab that I took at trying to plant this neglected corner slope that I don't even see from my house, but I felt bad for my neighbors who have to drive down that road. And all they see is, where I throw my grass clippings, and weeds. And like I said, poison ivy, bittersweet, and you pick an invasive species, it's there. And I took a stab at it, and Ogon spirea is doing great there. The tough plant, not only tough, but like you said, looks great. I love that combination. I was daydreaming about it as you said it. I love the addition of a purple grass. That's perfect because it's going to, purple and gold, so the yellow color, it makes a great combination, and the upright habit of the grass is going to look great with the upright of the sedum. I think that's a winner. So yeah, I mean, anytime you want to come over and plant that in my yard, Danielle, I'm free. I'll provide the shovel, and then you just go to town.
Wow.
I'll bring you out an iced tea, from time to time, if you want, and then
tempting, but hard pass. Hard pass.
Oh, all right then. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter with his thoughts on plant pairings.
Often when a couple meets someone who is single, they quickly try to set them up with another person they know who is single. This is usually done without consulting either of the single parties. To quote the legendary Three Dog Night, one is the loneliest number, and humans can't abide loneliness. Fortunately, things in the garden often come in pairs. You have one, you get the other. Grow monada, you will have bumblebees. Plant a winterberry, and you bring in the birds. Add milkweed, and the butterflies are not far behind. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we always liked both members of a couple? Unfortunately, it's not always so. You might adore your friend Robin and find her husband, Steve, a bore. Not that I know anyone with those names. And so, many garden flocks come with their unwanted companion, powdery mildew. Hollyhocks bring Japanese beetles, and if you give a hosta a home, you will also find yourself supporting slugs, or worse, deer. When you find a good plant pairing, like Danielle and maybe Steve have offered up here, cherish it, and even better, repeat it.
Geez, a lot of the pairings that Peter mentioned weren't all positive. There was quite a few negative pairings there, especially having to do with garden pests and diseases.
Yeah, well, at least he didn't mention Franks and beans.
All right, maybe the expert can help me out. Maybe the expert will mention Franks and beans. Let's see who we have up next.
I'm Amy Galloway, and I am a lead horticulturalist at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center in Austin, Texas. I find that the plant pairings that I love the most are plant pairings that contrast each other in colors, sometimes also textures, but in contrasting each other, it really highlights the color and the texture of each other. A great example of this is the Texas bluebells, the Eustoma exaltatum, paired with the Solidago nemuralis, the dwarf prairie goldenrod. The Texas bluebells on their own are just an incredible flower. Deep purple, bell-shaped, open flowers. And the plant will have many flowers per plant. It is just totally incredible. And the foliage is really interesting too. I really like the foliage. It's kind of a blue-green, light and delicate foliage. And all of that together compared to and growing next to the dwarf goldenrod is such an amazing pairing because they do have the differing textures and the differing colors. The goldenrod is, of course, a golden yellow flower, a totally different shape. It's more of like a spike with these lateral floral, full of tiny flowers, of golden tiny yellow flowers, so that when you stand back, it's like a little spike of golden yellow, incredible to look at, but also incredible for our pollinators as well. So there's a plus there as well. And then when you get down to the foliage, it's finer and just a nice complementary contrast to the Texas bluebells. Additionally, the bluebells can get kind of heavy from all of those blooms, and they will arc and almost fall over a bit in the garden bed. So I love to plant them next to that prairie goldenrod because it's sturdy and it will actually hold up the Texas bluebell, but it doesn't look like it's holding it up. They're just growing next to each other. So an incredible pairing that looks beautiful, but also practically works in the garden. My second favorite plant pairing is giant coneflower and purple coneflower. So two coneflowers, that are related to each other in that they're in the same plant family, Asteraceae, but the giant coneflower is Rudbeckia maxima, and the purple coneflower is Echinacea purpurea. So they are related in the same plant family, but they have different genuses. You can tell they're a little bit related, but they don't look extremely similar. I'd really love to put the giant coneflower as a back border to the garden bed. It gets very tall flower stalks that are up to 6 feet tall, and it will have a striking yellow coneflower on top of each flower stalk. It really looks good in this mass planting like that because you have all of these tall stalks together. They all sway in the wind, and it's quite beautiful. After it's done blooming, we cut them down and even cut the basal foliage down. And then soon after that, the basal foliage starts coming back. But then a lot of the year, they actually will be that low to the ground basal foliage that looks a lot like cabbage or something like that grows close to the ground. And it really has a silvery blue, delicate looking large leaf, water beads on it. I think that they are just really interesting and really beautiful. People are always complimenting them in the garden. And they're nice to have at that back border because they get so tall, but they also can hold their own and still draw the eye even when they aren't blooming. But when they are blooming, I love having the giant coneflower in the back of the bed and the blooming purple coneflower in front of it, also kind of in a mass planting, but directly in front. And I love the contrast of the silvery blue foliage, like I said, for the giant coneflower, but the purple coneflower also has that basal rosette of foliage close to the ground, but it's more of a forest green and a rougher, tougher looking leaf. And then as it blooms, it's just an incredible magnetic pink, purple, magenta coneflower. And so I really love seeing these next to each other like that as examples of coneflowers, but these look pretty different in their plant structure and growth habits, and the flower heads themselves in their shape look similar, but the colors really complement each other, and the heights really complement each other as well. So that's 2 of my favorite plant pairings, and I hope y'all enjoyed and possibly have some new ideas to try out in your own gardens at home.
Well, I'm certainly glad that we got somebody from a warmer locale to do some plant pairings for us, because I knew that we were just going to do you and me, mostly New England pairings.
Well, in my defense, a lot of what I recommended is already into zone 7 and 8. So,
okay, yeah. All right, okay,
all
right.
I provide more coverage than you did, so I win the episode.
Of course, it's always about winning.